was an item on the 6 o'clock news highlighting the trouble at Broxtowe which angered people there.
7,000 people live on the Broxtowe estate, but their lives are being ruined by a criminal minority who say they're in control. Most are young thugs with a history of vandalism, violence and disorder.
We spent, in 1984, £18,000 to improve this property. The tenants were chased out of here, absolutely frightened. Within hours of them leaving, this property was destroyed.
Local people are frightened to give evidence and are too scared to be identified for fear of reprisals. Their voices have been disguised.
Then there followed 2 interviews with local residents done in silhouette. That means their faces were blacked out to make them unrecognisable and their voices were artificially distorted. But to anyone who knew them on the estate, they were instantly recognisable. Both men had agreed to do the interviews on the basis that they would have total anonymity.
My first reaction was that I could recognise everybody on that programme. I had no difficulty whatsoever.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it at all. They're professional people, or supposedly professional people. They should have handled this in a professional way. And if they recognised that there was a fault on that particular shot, they shouldn't have put it out. They should have scrapped it.
The Broxtowe news item was originated by journalists here at the BBC headquarters in Nottingham. They sent the completed package electronically to Television Centre in London, where the national news is edited. The BBC say they realised the silhouettes filmed in Broxtowe needed further blackening before transmission. This was done, but the monitor was wrongly set and produced an image which looked darker than it really was. Staff in London should have spotted this, but didn't.
The moment the item went out, it was clear that something had gone wrong and that some apologies needed to be made. In my view, even though every effort had been made to get it right and the anonymity principle was absolutely at the centre of the journalist's mind, both in London and in Nottingham, they failed to see as clearly as it was clear to all of us watching it that something had gone wrong, and I wished in retrospect the item would have been either edited or indeed dropped.
Some people in Broxtowe would also have preferred to see the news item dropped. The man who was forced to move home after it went out was too scared to talk on TV again. The other man agreed to do so under heavy disguise. He told us of the effect the news report had had on him.
People who don't even live on the street, like the other side of Nottingham, just phoned me up and said, "I seen you on the TV."
How did you feel?
Horrified, because that just made my situation a lot worse.
In what way worse?
Well, I've had threats like the gang of youth up there's already said, like, "We seen you on the TV, and your number's marked."
How serious are these threats?
It could end in death. I mean, they've only got to just put something through the letterbox or through the windows.
Such threats would have to be taken seriously by anybody who lives on the Broxtowe estate. Burning out or vandalising houses is common. This road, for instance, is known locally as Beirut. During the day it's quiet enough, but at night it's a racetrack for joyriders. Cars as well as houses have been burnt out, and frequently there's a rowdy crowd out here until the small hours. Within minutes of our arrival, we attracted a hostile crowd.
Yeah, good f***ing shot and all, man.
As we discovered, nobody who lives here would talk about local problems without a guarantee of anonymity for fear of reprisals. It's a sort of situation which the BBC feels justifies the use of silhouette interviews as the only way of telling the story.
There are some people who have an important story to tell. Often they want to tell it on the BBC, and they will only do it if we can afford them anonymity, and we must do our best to deliver that.
So what went wrong? Silhouette or blacked out interviews are done by putting a powerful light behind the person and none on their face. But disguising people in this way can be risky, as the BBC's Producer Guidelines Handbook makes clear. The section on anonymity states, backlighting must be precisely judged. Viewers sometimes complain that faces which are supposed to be in darkness can be partly discerned.
I don't think it's just a question of blacking out. I think it's a question of getting rid of the shape of the head. I think it's getting rid of the intonation of the voice. There's 2 or 3 issues there. All the emphasis has been on the fact that the lighting was wrong. I don't think that's the case. I could have recognised them even if the lighting had been right.
There are lots of different ways of disguising faces, and complaints about them not working are rare. The BBC has now instituted an inquiry into the whole procedure.
I've made it clear that for the time being, I think that silhouetting is unsatisfactory for daily programmes with sharp deadlines and short turnaround times, though I'm not ruling it out forever. But I think for the time being, whilst we conduct the other thing that we're doing, which is a fairly extensive internal audit of all the various techniques that are available to disguise people's identity, something we had already planned to do, but we're now doing, and we're increasing the pace of that inquiry. Until that inquiry reports, I would be reluctant to see silhouetting done in news programmes, certainly without a great deal of checking and preparation.
I think we can learn that you never do interviews in that way again. That when you do interview people, you put wigs on them, you put hats on them, you put hoods on them. You never allow them to use their own voices, you always have somebody else's voiceover. That, I think, is the only way to preserve anonymity, and you certainly don't do it against their own window with their own ornaments.
And this is definites, this isn't just guidelines, you're saying?
It's definites, yes. We're actually talking about possibly people's lives and certainly people's health.
I'd like to say to the BBC, don't guarantee to do something when you can't do it, because they have made my life sheer hell.
There is no doubt, I want to make this absolutely clear, that the only appropriate response for the BBC is a complete and utter apology.
Well, that's presumably the kind of complaint that could land on the desk of our studio guest this week. He's Peter Danheiser, the newly appointed head of a 5-man team called the Programme Complaints Unit, the BBC's latest creation in its drive to be seen to be accountable and to be accountable. We also have with us James Moyer, who is Deputy Director of Corporate Affairs at the BBC and was formerly a leading programme maker as head of the Light Entertainment Department. Every year, 400,000 people telephone the BBC and another 100,000 write in with comments, queries and complaints. Mr Danheiser estimates that some 3,000 of those may become his clients as he sees them. He's promising that the injustices you suffer or the inaccuracies or breach of standards you object to will be given appropriate redress. A corporate phrase, the true meaning of which we'll now try to discover. Peter Danheiser, let's take that complaint, first of all, of the 6 o'clock news, just as an example, not in detail. Is that the kind of thing you see yourself dealing with?
Absolutely. We're going to offer a service to our licence payers who will be our clients in future. They can write to me as a named person. I'll look at serious complaints, and that is definitely serious breaches of privacy, breaches of standards that we're accepted in the BBC over the years.
But you see, News and Current Affairs, as we've just seen, have actually dealt with that problem. I mean, will you reach over, as it were, into their department and say, hang on, I'm going to look at that, I'm not going to leave you to deal with it yourself?
No, and you've seen how adequately, I hope, the situation has been dealt with within News and Current Affairs. We wouldn't step in, but I offer a named person that people can write to, a single one-stop shop, if you like, to deal with those matters.
So if the man who's complaining writes to you and not to them, you get to deal with it?
Most certainly.
Jim Moyer, as a former programme maker, can you see a problem there? Aren't programmes going to become, if you like, proprietorial, not just about their programmes, but about their problems?
Well, I think that it's difficult for me to speak on behalf of the entire creative community, but I have to say that accountability starts at the very beginning of the programme process. And I think producers in the main will not find this particular form of accountability a difficulty.
You don't think they'll dread seeing Peter Danheiser coming or getting his call?
I think that they will be aware that they have potentially transgressed if they hear Peter's name, but that doesn't mean to say that they will not cooperate with the system of accountability.
OK, I want to go into it a bit further, but I mean, as it seems, I think, at first glance, it's only going to work if Peter Danheiser has some real power, and I know that that's something that concerns our audience. Sir, would you like to make a point?
Yes, I would. Being someone who's only complained to the BBC once, it would be nice, in fact, to have a named person. But that's good enough. But this is an internal appointment.